Hi, I'm Jenna. I'm 30, and until recently I thought my biggest challenge would be deciding between peonies or dahlias for my wedding bouquet. Turns out the real obstacle, my own mother and my half-sister turning what should have been the happiest time of my life into a battlefield. And me. I had to do the unthinkable. I uninvited them. Let me back up. I've been with my fiancé, Miles. He's 31 for 6 amazing, steady, hilarious years. We've lived through job changes, relocations, a pandemic, and one very unfortunate bout of food poisoning on a ski trip, don't ask. He proposed last March in our kitchen while making pancakes. Not Instagram glamorous, but it was perfect. No crowd, no performance, just us messy hair and syrupy fingers. I said yes before he even got the whole question out. Cue the confetti. Right? Wrong. The first person I called was my mom. I expected squeals. Instead, she said, "Oh, you know this is going to upset Tessa." Tessa is my 24-year-old half-sister. Same mom, different dads. Our relationship. Let's say we share a last name and little else. We were never close. Growing up, she was the fun one, the wild spirit, the needs. Extra patience child. Meanwhile, I was responsible. Translation invisible unless something needed fixing. I laughed when mom said it. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. Apparently, me getting engaged was an emotional assault on poor Tessa because she was single. Yes, really. I brushed it off. Figured it was just a weird comment. Every family has their quirks, right? A few weeks later, Tessa announced she was getting married to a guy she'd been dating for 3 months. I wish I were making this up. His name was Evan. I'd never met him. Neither had mom, by the way, but she was thrilled. Suddenly, it was all Tessa deserves to be happy. And isn't love just magical? I bit my tongue. Her life, her circus. Fast forward to July, the circus caught fire. Evan cheated, brace yourself, with Tessa's best friend. 2 months after their wedding, she filed for divorce. It was messy, it was public, and it was brutal. I genuinely felt awful for her. I sent messages, tried to check in. She ignored me every time. No response. Just cold silence. Eventually it clicked. She didn't want support. She wanted someone to blame. And apparently I was it. According to my cousin Lila, family tea master, Tessa believed my engagement had pressured her into rushing her marriage. Like I had challenged her to a wedding duel and she lost badly. By fall, things were tense. Tessa ghosted me completely. Mom avoided wedding topics like I was inviting her to my own funeral. I figured they just needed time to cool off. Oh, naive me. November came and Miles and I mailed out our wedding invites. 70 guests, cozy winter ceremony, classy, not flashy. We were giddy, everything was finally coming together. Then mom called. She never calls. I swear she's a happy birthday once a year texter. So I picked up thinking maybe, just maybe, she was ready to be supportive. Spoiler, she wasn't. It started friendly. How's the cake tasting? Miles doing okay. Then she dropped it. So, you're really going through with the wedding? I blinked. Yeah, why wouldn't I? A dramatic sigh, like she'd just read my obituary. Well, I've been thinking about Tessa, and I think you should reconsider. Reconsider what? The wedding. Or at least postpone it. I laughed, thought she was joking. She wasn't. She's still healing from the divorce. This celebration, it's going to reopen wounds. I sat there stunned. You want me to cancel my wedding, Basit? Because Tessa got divorced. Well, yes, she said, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. Or just do something small. A courthouse, maybe. Just immediate family. You know, not such a big production. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom. This isn't about production. It's about celebrating something real. Miles and I have been together for 6 years. This day matters to us. Another sigh. The kind that makes you want to throw your phone across the room. If you really loved your sister, you'd do this for her. That was it. That line broke something in me. I'd tolerated the passive digs, the weird favoritism, the emotional acrobatics, but now she was asking me to erase myself for Tessa. I tried to stay calm. I'm sorry Tessa's going through a rough time, but this isn't about her. It's our wedding. We've planned it for months. The venue is booked. Deposits paid. She didn't choose to have her marriage implode, Jenna mom snapped. No, but she did choose to marry a stranger after 90 days. That didn't go over well. Cue yelling. Accusations of selfishness. She even dropped the classic "I thought I raised you better." I ended the call shaking. I called Miles, told him everything. He was as stunned as I was. They really think your happiness is a personal attack? He said. And he was right. Over the next few weeks, it spiraled. Mom kept calling, same argument, Tessa is fragile. A small wedding would be more respectful. Then Tessa started chiming in. First, the passive-aggressive texts. Must be nice to have a perfect life. Then the guilt trips. Do you have to get married in January? It feels pointed. I ignored her. She escalated. Voicemails. Long ones, crying ones, rambling about how I was hurting her recovery, how weddings were triggering, how she couldn't sleep. Mom backed her up every time. She cried all night after seeing your save the date. You're making it worse by ignoring her. I was exhausted. I couldn't breathe without stepping on their emotional landmines. It wasn't grief anymore. It was control. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what yet. All I knew was if I didn't take back the steering wheel soon, they were going to crash this whole thing before I even made it down the aisle. 2 days after the wedding invitations went out, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at my phone like it was a loaded weapon. Another voicemail from Mom. Another one from Tessa. I didn't even listen to them this time. I just deleted them without pressing play. I was at my limit. That night, I curled up on the couch next to Miles, my laptop glowing on my lap, and said something I never thought I'd have to say. I think I need to uninvite them. He didn't flinch. He didn't ask if I was sure. He just said, yeah, I've been waiting for you to say that. That made me cry harder than anything else had. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time I felt completely seen. It was like finally ripping off a too tight bandage. Painful, but freeing. I sat there and drafted the email. Simple, direct, not cruel, just honest. After months of emotional pressure, guilt trips, and manipulative behavior, I no longer feel supported by you. For my own peace of mind, I'm making the decision to uninvite you from my wedding. This isn't a punishment, it's a boundary. I need to protect my mental health, and that means stepping away from relationships that continue to hurt me. I sent it to both Mom and Tessa. Then I closed my laptop and exhaled like I hadn't breathed in weeks. The fallout came fast. Mom's reply landed within the hour. It was a novella. You've betrayed your own blood. You've let a man come between you and your family. I never thought my daughter would be so cold. I didn't reply. Tessa's email came the next morning. Short, angry. You think you're better than me? That's all this is. You're punishing me for being vulnerable. Congrats on your perfect little life. I hope it's worth losing your sister over. I didn't reply to that either. But that wasn't the end of it. Aunt Diane called. So did Cousin Luke. A couple texts from numbers I didn't even have saved came rolling in, all echoing the same theme. Just let it go. She's your mom. Is a wedding really worth destroying the family? I sat in the kitchen one morning rereading a message from a distant cousin, someone who hadn't spoken to me in years, lecturing me about family unity, and I just laughed. Not bitterly, not even angrily, just tiredly. Because none of them had seen the hours I'd spent crying on the bathroom floor. Or the days I couldn't sleep. Or the panic attacks that came every time I saw Mom's name light up my screen. They saw a wedding invitation. I saw emotional survival. But then something beautiful started to happen. The people who actually mattered. They showed up. My Aunt Lena, my dad's sister, called me crying. She said, I've watched you be treated like an afterthought your whole life, and I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Miles's older brother offered to walk me down the aisle if I wanted someone by my side. My best friend Naomi sent me a playlist called Songs to Block Family 2 and followed it up with a meme about burning bridges while strutting in heels. And my cousin Sam, the only one from Mom's side who hadn't chimed in with unsolicited guilt. He texted me, family doesn't mean loyalty. Loyalty means loyalty. Those words stuck to my ribs. It still hurt, of course. I was grieving the fantasy. The version of my family I wished existed. But it was like mourning a person who'd already been gone a long time. And just when I thought I'd hit the low point of this story, I found out how far Tessa was willing to sink. Miles came home from work one evening, tossing his phone onto the kitchen counter with a scowl. You're not gonna believe this, he said. He was right. Tessa had texted him. Not me, him. It started with the usual, hey, I know you probably think I'm a monster right now, followed by a whole paragraph about how she was just struggling and didn't know who else to talk to. Miles showed me the message immediately. I rolled my eyes. She's fishing. Don't respond. But she didn't stop. Over the next few days, she sent more. More vulnerable, more emotional, more manipulative. Talking about how no one really sees her and how Miles had always seemed so genuine. Then it crossed the line. I think we have a connection. I know it's wrong, but I can't help it. I've never felt this safe with someone. I felt the air suck out of the room. Miles just stared at the screen like it had insulted his entire bloodline. She's not just trying to ruin the wedding, he said. She's trying to ruin us. We took screenshots. Every single message. We didn't reply not once, but we documented everything just in case. I didn't go nuclear. I didn't call Tessa and scream. I did something better. I forwarded the screenshots to my mom. No caption, no explanation, just the receipts. I knew she'd defend Tessa. I was fully prepared for it. What I wasn't prepared for was radio silence. No reply, no call, no denial, just silence. For 3 whole days. And then an email from Mom. Just one line. I didn't know. I'm sorry. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. Because suddenly, I realized she could believe it. Somewhere deep down, she knew Tessa was capable of this. She just didn't want to admit it until she had proof shoved in her face. And now that she had, it was too late. You don't get to pick sides when the damage is done. You don't get to play neutral after years of enabling. By that weekend, Miles and I had updated the wedding team. Security was tightened. The venue was told in no uncertain terms that neither my mother nor Tessa was welcome. And me, I started sleeping through the night again. By the time New Year's Eve rolled around, Miles and I had everything locked in. Venue paid, dress altered, guest list updated twice thanks to some last-minute drama. Security? Yes, we had security. I wish I was exaggerating. I'd never imagined needing to brief a wedding coordinator on how to keep my own mother out. But here we were, 2025, the year of boundaries. We were 2 weeks from the big day, and I finally felt peace. That lasted 72 hours. Then Miles got another message. Not from Tessa this time. From a friend of Tessa's who I'll call Becca. A name I only knew from social media and not in a good way. The kind of girl who posts cryptic quotes about loyalty and betrayal right after passive-aggressively tagging you in a group photo. Becca slid into Miles's DMs with a gem of a message. Hey, I know this is weird, but I think you should know Jenna's been talking trash about your family behind your back, just looking out for you. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Miles didn't. He just looked tired. I feel like this is just their next move, he said. Try to split us from the outside. And he was right. The desperation was dripping off every message. We didn't respond. We blocked Becca just like we had Tessa. Then the public posts started. Tessa posted a long Facebook rant because of course she did about fake people family betrayal and the cruelty of being erased by those you love. No names. But it didn't take a genius to figure out who she was subtweeting. People started commenting. OMG, what happened? You deserve better. They'll regret it someday. I didn't respond. Neither did Miles. But I won't lie, it stung. It stung because she was telling our family, our cousins, our neighbors, people who didn't know the whole story. She was painting me as some cold, bitter bridezilla when all I'd done was protect myself from being emotionally bulldozed. And the worst part, Mom liked the post. Didn't comment, just left a little blue thumbs up like she was co-signing it all. That broke something. Because silence was one thing, but public support for a lie that felt like betrayal carved in stone. So I made one final move. I didn't post screenshots, I didn't write a call-out post. I emailed a handful of close family members, people who had been wavering or asking questions. And I told the truth. No drama, no dragging, just facts. This has been an incredibly painful process, and I've stayed quiet out of respect. But I need to clear the air. I didn't cut off Mom and Tessa because of drama. I did it because of repeated emotional abuse manipulation and a pattern of behavior that escalated into inappropriate messages to my fiancé. I have documentation, I have receipts, but I'm not looking for a war, I'm looking for peace. And that peace means moving forward without them. Most people never responded, but a few did. My cousin Nina replied, I had no idea. Thank you for telling me. I'm on your side, Jenna. My uncle Dan called and apologized for doubting me. Said he'd always known Tessa was a lot but didn't realize how deep it ran. That was enough. The week before the wedding, things were quiet. Too quiet. Miles and I joked that we were waiting for the final boss battle, and right on schedule it came. The morning of the wedding. I was in the bridal suite halfway through my makeup when my maid of honor burst in. Amanda's face said it all. They're here, she said. Your mom. And Tessa. At the gate. I froze. What? They tried to talk their way past security. Said they were your real family and had a right to be there. I stood up, heart racing. Are they inside? No, Amanda said quickly. Security held them at the gate. But they're making a scene. I peeked through the window. Sure enough, there they were, standing in the parking lot like they belonged in a soap opera. Mom was crying. Tessa was shouting at the top of her lungs. Guests were arriving. Everyone could hear it. I saw one of Miles's cousins do a double take before walking briskly inside. I turned to Amanda. Do we call the police? She hesitated. The venue manager said they're on standby, but it might escalate things. I took a breath. My lipstick hand was shaking. No, let them scream. Let people see. Amanda nodded, her jaw clenched. I'll let security know not to let them in. At all. I went back to my mirror. My hands were steady now. I wasn't scared anymore. Let the world see who they really were. By the time the ceremony started, they were gone. The manager told me later they'd called a rideshare and left after Tessa screamed something about being erased from history. The irony. It was never about erasing her. It was about protecting myself. The ceremony was perfect. The sun broke through the clouds just as I walked down the aisle. Miles cried. I did too. We said our vows in front of the people who showed up not just physically but emotionally, who saw us for who we were and stood with us. At the reception, the drama became comedy. People shared what they'd seen or heard in the parking lot. Someone even filmed Tessa shouting and sent it to Amanda. We all laughed at how dramatic she sounded, screaming, "This isn't over," like she was auditioning for a soap. It was cathartic. Miles and I danced under strings of warm lights. My godmother gave the sweetest toast. Amanda cried during hers. And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Free. Later that night, when I checked my phone, I saw it. A text from Mom. You'll regret this one day. You chose a man over your own family. I stared at the screen for a moment. Then I deleted it. No reply, no second thoughts. Just quiet. 1 week after the wedding, I was still floating. Not in the cheesy fairy tale kind of way. No, this was different. This was peace. Real earned, expensive peace. The wedding photos had just started rolling in, and I looked at myself in every one of them with the same reaction. Who is that woman? Because she didn't look scared, or small, or like she was begging for someone's approval. She looked like she belonged in her own life. But you know who didn't feel like they belonged anymore? Mom and Tessa. And karma was just getting started. I got the news the same way I got all the best family gossip via my cousin Lila. She called me on a random Tuesday morning whispering like she was breaking national security protocol. You will not believe what just happened, she said. I might, I replied. Try me. Your mom kicked Tessa out of the house. I blinked. Wait, what? What happened? Lila didn't even take a breath. Apparently, ever since the wedding, Tessa's been in full meltdown mode, sulking around the house, screaming about how you ruined her life. But last night, she turned on your mom. What do you mean? She told your mom it was her fault you got married. Said she didn't fight hard enough to stop it. Accused her of being weak. Called her a failure of a parent. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of the irony. Mom had been bending over backward for Tessa for years, defending her, making excuses, blaming everyone else. And now that blind loyalty had finally snapped the other way. According to Lila, the fight got ugly. Screaming, crying, slamming doors. Tessa even tried to guilt-trip Mom again, said she'd ruined her one chance at happiness, that letting me get married had sent a message that Tessa wasn't important. Apparently, Mom lost it. Told Tessa she was tired of being everyone's emotional punching bag. That she couldn't fix what Tessa kept breaking. That she needed to grow up and take some responsibility. Then she told her to pack her bags and go. She actually kicked her out. I asked, still stunned. Yep, Lila said. Tessa's staying with some friend now. But it's bad. Like scorched earth bad. I sat there silent for a second. Not happy, not smug, just still. Because this wasn't about revenge, not really. This was about gravity finally catching up to people who thought they could float above consequences forever. And now they were crashing back down. Mom tried to call me later that day. I let it ring. Then she sent a text. I didn't know how bad it had gotten. I'm sorry for everything. I stared at it for a long time. Because that sentence, the one I'd wanted for years, it finally showed up. But it came with a catch. It didn't say, I'm sorry I hurt you. It said, I'm sorry I didn't know how bad she was. Still about Tessa. Still not about me. So I didn't reply. For the first time in my life, I wasn't desperate for her apology. I had something better now. Distance, perspective, self-respect, and a husband who kissed my forehead every morning and called me Mrs. Rhodes like it was the most romantic title in the world. The fallout didn't end there. A few days later, another text came in, this time from Tessa. She was clearly spiraling. Everyone's turned against me, hope you're happy. No greeting, no context, just blame. I stared at it, thinking about the person I used to be. The version of me that would have apologized. The version that would have called her, begged to smooth things over, asked how to make it right. That version of me, she was gone. So I typed back 2 words, "Get help," and then I blocked her. That wasn't cruelty. That was clarity. I didn't owe her healing. I owed it to myself to stop bleeding every time she pointed her pain at me. It's been almost a month since the wedding. I haven't spoken to my mother. I haven't heard a word from Tessa since that last text. And you know what? It's been quiet. Gloriously, eerily quiet. At first, the silence felt like walking into a dark room where I knew a bomb used to be. Like I was flinching at echoes, but slowly that tension loosened. And I realized there was no bomb anymore, just empty space. And in that space, I started building. Not revenge, not a comeback narrative, just a life. Miles and I moved into a new apartment. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, big windows, a little balcony where I planted succulents like I had something to nurture again. We started hosting Sunday brunches, casual ones. Mimosas, banana pancakes, playlists full of indie covers. Friends dropped by in sweats. No drama, no shade, no eggshells. We called it family hours, because that's what it felt like, family the way it should have always been. Chosen, not inherited. One morning while flipping through the mail, I found an envelope with Mom's handwriting. No return address, no card inside, just a folded letter. I stood at the kitchen counter holding it like it might bite me. I didn't even mean to open it. I told myself I'd throw it away. But curiosity is a tricky thing, and so is hope. So I unfolded it. It wasn't long, just a few sentences. I know you think I picked sides. Maybe I did. But I didn't mean to lose you in the process. I miss you. I always will. No apology, no ownership, just passive nostalgia dressed up like closure. I stared at the page for a long time, and then I folded it back up and slid it into the junk drawer next to expired coupons and mismatched takeout menus. Not out of bitterness, just because it didn't deserve a frame. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just stood there knowing exactly what that meant. I was done grieving someone who refused to grow. A few days later, my cousin Nina invited me to a small get-together, just some family members and old friends. At first, I hesitated. I didn't know who'd be there, didn't know if I was ready to show up and pretend like nothing had happened. But Miles looked at me and said, "Go. If you don't feel good, leave. But don't stay small for people who aren't even invited." So I went. And you know what? It was weird, but it was fine. People asked about the wedding, real questions, not shady ones. They complimented the photos, laughed about the speeches, told me I looked radiant. No one asked about Tessa. No one brought up Mom. It was like everyone got the memo that I wasn't available for that conversation anymore. At one point, Aunt Rachel, who had stayed suspiciously neutral during the whole drama, pulled me aside and said, "I wish I had spoken up sooner. You deserved better." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. Because I wasn't there for apologies. I was there for the closure I gave myself. There's something strange about peace. When you've lived in chaos long enough, peace feels like a trick-in. But now I'm getting used to it. I find it in small things. A full night's sleep. A text from Miles that just says, "Thinking about pancakes again." My wedding dress still in the bag. Still perfect. I've stopped checking my blocked messages folder. Stopped reading subtweets that aren't about me, but obviously are. Stopped explaining myself to people who never listened in the first place. And most importantly, I've stopped waiting for them to be different. Because here's what no one tells you about family reconciliation stories. Sometimes the happy ending isn't getting back together. Sometimes it's walking away quietly, firmly, and not looking back. Sometimes it's choosing yourself and realizing that's not selfish. It's survival. The last time I thought about Tessa for more than a few seconds, I was scrolling through Instagram and saw a post from someone she used to be close with, and a blurry photo from a bar. Tessa in the background, head down, glass half full. The caption read, "Some people self-destruct and call it healing." I kept scrolling because I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't rooting for her downfall. I just wasn't rooting for her at all. That's the part no one understands until you've lived it. Forgiveness isn't always about hugging and moving on. Sometimes it's just this: you stop holding the door open. You stop waiting on the porch. You let it close, and you move on. I always thought the last page of a story would feel like fireworks. Big, loud, undeniable. But this feels like turning off a light and realizing the room's already warm. No apology, no dramatic return. No family reunion wrapped in a sitcom hug. Just this, a new apartment that smells like fresh coffee. A husband humming to himself in the kitchen, and a peace I didn't beg for or built. 3 months after the wedding, I sat on the floor of our living room sifting through a box of old photos I hadn't opened in years. You know the kind? Birthday hats, Crooked smiles, blurry backyard barbecues. In one of them, I'm 8, holding a sparkler, standing just behind my mom and Tessa. You can barely see me. I'm half-cropped, half-shadow. I remember that day. Tessa had cried over not being the center of attention. Mom had spent the whole afternoon trying to cheer her up. And me, I lit the sparklers, quietly, alone. I slipped the photo back into the box. I wasn't angry, just done letting that version of myself drive the narrative. People ask if I'll ever talk to my mother again. I don't have a dramatic answer. Just this, maybe one day. But it'll be on a different porch, with a different script, and a version of her that's done pretending she didn't cause the storm she's standing in. Until then, I've got nothing left to say. Tessa. She's still spinning, last I heard. Bouncing from couch to couch, friendship to friendship, crisis to crisis. There's a strange peace in knowing you're not the villain in someone's story anymore. You're just not in it. A few weeks ago, I got an invitation in the mail. Not a wedding, not a baby shower, a family reunion. Mom's side. The envelope was thick, gilded edges, RSVP instructions with meal choices and dress code. I turned it over in my hands like it might explode. Then I tossed it in the recycling bin without opening it. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Because you don't keep going back to the house that set you on fire just because they installed nicer curtains. Last Sunday, Miles and I had brunch on our balcony. It wasn't fancy eggs on toast, coffee, and chipped mugs Miles in flannel pants he refuses to throw away. He handed me a folded napkin with something scribbled on it. "I never told you this," he said, "but when we first started dating, I knew I'd marry you the day you told me you were done chasing people who refused to see your worth." I smiled, unfolding the napkin. Under the note was a doodle of me holding a sparkler, like the one from that photo. But in this one, I wasn't in the background. I was center frame, lit up. I laughed, then cried, then kissed him with toast crumbs on my lips. It was the most unphotogenic moment of my life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. This isn't the kind of story that goes viral. No court orders, no arrests, no scandalous voice memos or TikToks with 1 million likes. Just a woman who drew a line, held it, and walked herself into a life worth living. This was never about revenge. It was about return. Returning to the version of myself that didn't shrink to make others comfortable. Returning to a space where love wasn't a reward, it was the baseline. Returning to peace not because I won, but because I stopped fighting battles that weren't mine to begin with. So here's my final confession. I didn't burn the bridge. I just stopped rebuilding it. And I walked away with the match still in my pocket, unlit, unused, and completely unnecessary. Because some endings don't need fire. Just a door, closed, quietly, for good. Story 2. My wife returned for my fortune after betraying me and taking my children. She arrived now to take my millions. However, I made a single move that destroyed her flawless strategy. I'm a 34-year-old man who needs to vent about this bizarre incident, due to the fact that the past several years have resembled a poor Netflix drama. But I did experience it myself. I've been putting this all down in writing for a while, but now it's time. I suppose I should give some backstory first. In college, I was your average computer science geek, the type who could code for 12 hours straight and basically lived off energy drinks. I received my degree from a respectable public university in the Northeast. It wasn't MIT or something similar. I started working for a tiny tech business that was attempting to develop cloud security software as soon as I graduated. Let's just say it was one of those usual 5 men in a small work startups, but I won't go into too much detail so as not to dox myself. Initially, the salary wasn't great, roughly $65,000 annually in a somewhat pricey city, but they did provide stock options. I decided it was worth the risk, and I'll talk more about it later. Furthermore, the founders gave off the impression that they were genuinely knowledgeable. In contrast, several of the other firms I spoke with were essentially consuming all of the venture capital funds. I met Amy here, albeit that's definitely not her true name. It was the most cliched and adorable thing ever. We had a major deployment the night before, so I was barely getting 2 hours of sleep when I was at this neighborhood coffee shop close to our workplace. I completely spilled my coffee on her MacBook. She was really easygoing about it, even though I felt like such a fool. In the end, I got her a new one. My credit card was maxed up, but it was worthwhile. LOL. That eventually led to getting drinks, which in turn led to dating. At the time, Amy was employed as a dental hygienist. Very intelligent, humorous, and undoubtedly superior to me in terms of appearance. We simply clicked. Do you know, When I babbled on about code, she genuinely looked interested, and I enjoyed hearing her tell me about the dentist office's nightmare patients. After dating for 2 years, we were married. It was a simple ceremony held in her parents' garden. We paid a down payment on a modest starter house in the suburbs using the majority of our funds. Although the 45-minute trip each way was awful, the schools were wonderful and we were planning ahead. After that, children came around really quickly. Max was born in 2019 and Lily in 2016. To be honest, those initial years were difficult juggling a startup job with diaper changes and midnight feedings. On some days, I honestly couldn't remember if I had taken a shower or not. However, Amy was fantastic with the children. In order to spend more time at home, she reduced her hours at the dentist office, and we managed to make it work. Slowly but gradually, the startup was expanding. We went from working with 5 men to a big workplace with about 50 workers. I was promoted to engineering manager and then lead developer. The stock options continued to vest. At Uninviting the share, I owned around 200,000 shares. To be honest, I assumed they would be worthless like most startup shares, but I decided to have them on hand anyhow. With a pleasant neighborhood, good schools, and yearly family trips to Disney, we had a rather wonderful existence. It wasn't very costly, but the children adored it. Our neighbors were also cool. In the summer, many young families host block parties. The whole fantasy of living in the suburbs. Amy befriended every other mother. While our children had playdates, I would go out for drinks with a few of the parents. A typical, dull, contented life. Then in 2021, Mike and Jessica took up residence next door. Mike aspired to be a fitness influencer. You are aware of the type. He consistently shares footage of his workouts in his garage on Instagram, arranged similarly to a CrossFit facility. Initially, quite amiable, always willing to provide a hand with household tasks and other things. Mike spent a lot of the day at home working on his brand or whatever because Jessica had long hours at a city legal company. I can see all the warning signs today, but you overlook things when you're juggling 2 small children and 50 to 60-hour work weeks trying to keep a business afloat during COVID. Or perhaps you see them but choose not to accept it. After having the children, Amy said she wanted to be in shape, so she started going to the gym at Mike's garage. She began going out with makeup on. Who does that? She would return full of energy and giggles. At first, I honestly thought it was good. She had more energy and was happy. God, I was a fool. Next door, Mike is obsessed with CrossFit. You know, it started off as simple things. For example, he would be assisting Amy with moving furniture or repairing something in our backyard when I got home from work. By the way, you're always shirtless since apparently having abs makes clothes uncool. We were attempting to seal this big transaction with a big tech business, so I was working insane hours at the startup. Think FIANG level, but I can't mention names. Deadlines were crazy, and we had a ton of security features to develop. I was working 14-hour days for a few weeks. Essentially, I only saw the children on the weekends. At first, Amy seemed to comprehend, but then the remarks began. Mike advises you to schedule family time. Mike believes that work-life balance is crucial. Yes, Amy, that's a great tale, but Mike's company is Instagramming gym selfies, and my work genuinely covers our mortgage. After that, she became really interested in exercise. And by really into it, I mean completely enamored. Due to the need that everything be organic and grass-fed, our food cost abruptly increased. She began purchasing all of the high-end vitamins that Mike suggested. Our kitchen had the appearance of a GNC, vomited in it. The exercise routine also becomes strange. At regular times, it used to happen around 3 times a week instead of daily, whenever I was with the children or at work. She had started wearing cosmetics to work out after returning from the gym wet after taking a shower flushed and sporting joyful hair. Who in heck does that? Apparently her old Target leggings were no longer up to standard, so she purchased all this pricey Lululemon gear. The strangest things, however, began with her phone. Amy had never been much of a techie. She would carelessly leave her phone in strange locations. All of a sudden, she's always texting and tilting the screen away from me as she's addicted to a 24/7. She refused to share her new password with me. Not because we were spying, but rather in case of an emergency involving the children, we used to know one another's passwords. The worst thing. She became quite combative about everything. For example, she would yell at me, "I never help with meal planning," when I asked what she wanted for supper. Or she could roll her eyes if I tried to discuss my workday. It's not all about your valuable startup. Actual Hyde and Jekyll. While Max and I were playing in the backyard one day, Mike caught a glimpse of Amy working out through their garage window in order to assist her with her form or whatever the guy was physically mashed up against her. Max says, "Mommy and Mike are best friends," and waves. "Yes, friend, I'm sure they are." I made an effort to speak with her about it, telling her that I felt strange about the amount of time she was spending there. A huge error. She went completely crazy, began yelling that I was jealous and in charge, how I was never home anyhow, and how I was attempting to prevent her from making friends. What made me care then? Then she began inciting arguments about money. The startup was not making much money. Although we were still growing, we were at ease. All of a sudden, nothing was sufficient. She needed a new automobile and wanted to remodel the kitchen. Wished to enroll Lily in a posh private school. She would give me the look of someone who didn't understand me when I described the difference between stock options and startup salaries. In hindsight, I ought to have anticipated this. I became aware of strange charges on our credit card. Upscale dining establishments. I have never paid for a motel in our own city. 20 minutes from home, who needs a hotel? I never saw her wearing anything from that lingerie store. The child began to behave differently from Lily. 8 changed from a cheerful, talkative child to a rather reserved one, no more than 5. Became needy and would weep every time I left for work. I once overheard him discussing with his stuffed animals that Mike and Mommy are staying over while Daddy is at work. That did really strike like a truck. I arrived home early one evening due to a delay in our deployment. Amy's car was in the driveway, but the house was dark. Mike's garage gym was playing music when I heard it. I thought I may try to make things clear as I went over. Speak to men. Yes. That's not what I discovered. I won't get into specifics, but let's just say that Amy's exercise regimen was undoubtedly not fitness-oriented. As usual, Mike's wife Jessica was working late at her legal practice. I simply recorded a video using my phone and left for home without confronting them. For over an hour, I just sat in my car digesting. I spoke with a lawyer after calling in ill the next day. The man advised me to pretend everything was okay while they were actually going about their business next door, act normal, gather proof, and keep them in the dark about the most trying week of my life. I thus had the footage of Amy and Mike working out stored in around 6 separate locations. That weekend, when my parents could take the kids, I was going to approach Amy. I had everything planned. Amy and Mike had their own plan and relocated first, but divorce papers were prepared and all the evidence was documented. It was just another Tuesday. I was working. When my team lead texts me to come to HR, I'm knee-deep in code reviews. Strange, but not entirely out of the ordinary, considering all the discussions around the Amazon takeover. 2 police officers are waiting when I enter. As it turned out, Amy had reported that I had hit her during a fight about money and had gone to the police that morning with bruises. She said that when she challenged me about working too much, I had lost control. She even had photos of her face and arms with injuries. I was arrested by the police at the office. The most embarrassing experience of my life, being placed in handcuffs in front of my colleagues. Before my brother was able to post bail, I was detained for 48 hours. I couldn't access my work laptop and I misplaced my phone. Company policy about arrests. Amy filed for an emergency restraining order which prevented me from returning home. I had to wear an ankle monitor and sleep on my brother's couch, like a criminal of some sort. I was placed on administrative leave by the firm. It's a kind way of saying, you're fired, but we'll hold off until the PR nightmare is over. 15 years without any issues. Got no parking tickets at all. I'm a domestic abuser all of a sudden. The local news featured my face. Due to domestic abuse, a local tech executive was arrested. Yes, things went really well with prospective employers. This is when things get really fouled up. This had been planned for weeks by Amy and Mike. Later on, I discovered that they had been recording all of our disagreements or casual discussions. They twisted photographing Amy whenever she knocked against anything and sustained a bruise. She is quite awkward. This entire fictitious history of abuse has always been constructed. They even enlisted the help of a few other local mothers. All of a sudden, the people I had barbecued with and whose children had celebrated their birthdays at our house began sending affidavits expressing their suspicions that I was aggressive and that they had overheard arguments from our home. Yes, because Amy was yelling at 6 in the morning about CrossFit. One even said she witnessed me violently grabbing Amy's arm as I was carrying groceries out of the car. She had hurt her wrist doing something with Mike, so I was assisting her with carrying her stuff. The worst thing, CPS became involved. Amy was granted temporary custody of the children. I was permitted to have 2-hour supervised visits every other weekend instead of seeing my kids every day. Do you realize how dysfunctional it is to have to watch your own children in a gloomy government office while a social worker records every conversation? To pay for a lawyer, I had to sell out some of my stock options. According to the company's bylaws, I could keep the remainder if I had worked there for more than 5 years. I suppose we should thank God for little mercies. All I could afford after paying child support and court expenses was this dreary studio apartment next to my brother's house. During visits, Lily refused to even look at me. I learned that Amy had informed her that I was mentally ill and that I needed to recover before I could return home. Max would simply cry and inquire as to why I had lost my affection for them, attempt to explain accusations of domestic abuse to a 5-year-old. Actually, it's not feasible, so don't. I also lost the majority of my buddies. It's funny how individuals vanish after being accused of something similar. Most of the men who stayed were coworkers who had witnessed the sacrifices I had made for my family. They were aware of the truth, but the ongoing legal proceedings prevented them from taking action. Mike and Amy, however, were no longer even attempting to conceal it. He had left his home with Jessica, who reportedly had her own problems. After she learned everything, they were behaving like the ideal couple, going out to restaurants, sharing gym pictures together, and financing their little romance with my child support money. In order to make ends meet, I had to start taking Uber rides on the weekends. Went from being in charge of engineering teams to taking up inebriated college students at 2 in the morning. The irony: interns from my previous employer were among my passengers. Make an effort to remain composed when a 22-year-old is discussing the fantastic project from which you were dismissed. I mentioned stock options. Do you recall them? The ones I had to cash out in part to cover the cost of the lawyers. Yes, things become crazy at this point. Let me first give you a picture of the bottom of the world. The 400-square-foot studio apartment where I was residing had the fragrance of the previous occupants. 50 cats worked 2 jobs and had a celebration. During the day, a junior developer works at a corporate hellhole, the only company that would consider hiring me, although my DV charge is still pending. In order to pay child support, an Uber driver at night eats peanut butter sandwiches and noodles. Because of lockup periods, I was unable to sell the roughly 200,000 shares of stock I still owned in my former business. The startup was performing fairly well, surviving but not terrific. Our security software assisted businesses in managing their cloud infrastructure. Boring technology. Though nothing significant, I am aware that Amazon Web Services has been snooping around for some time. Then for non-techies, Log4j appeared. Imagine if someone managed to exploit a small vulnerability to access the computer systems of nearly every business. No one took attention. Log4j is that. It just so happened that our program was quite effective in locating and repairing that hole. The right moment, the perfect location. On a random Tuesday, I was checking my phone in between Uber rides when I noticed that there were about 50 missed calls. AWS is acquiring these firms. In the takeover, stocks went from $4 to $247 per share. I felt I was having hallucinations, so I performed the calculations about 20 times. Before taxes, 49.4 million is equivalent to 200,000 shares times $247. I threw up as my first action. My lawyer is the second item. The third creature puked once again. This is where the fun begins. Local news outlets covered the acquisition story. Amazon paid $2.1 billion for the acquisition of a local IT business. Somewhere in there was my name, as one of the first workers. Who do you think reads the local tech news? Amy's attorney. I received this email from Amy within a day. It's the first since the arrest. Like we're still best friends or something, all lovely and worried. Hello, I hope all is well with you. Been considering our predicament. Perhaps we ought to discuss what's best for the children. Translation. I've heard you've become wealthy. I'll get my claws in now. I didn't answer. After sending my lawyer a screenshot, I returned to my Uber shift. Have to maintain appearances. Typical. As everything was completed. Closing the deal would take 3 months. Additionally, I didn't want Amy to start trouble before then. Amy wasn't finished, though. Mike set up my usual coffee shop the following day. Completely coincidence. Correct tries to be a good friend. Buddy. Hey dude. It's water under the bridge. Everybody makes errors. Amy sincerely apologizes for everything. I apologize. She said I had beaten her. Wrecked my reputation, had me imprisoned, and removed my children. But let's be buddies now that I'm worth millions. What an easy shift of heart. I continued to drive for Uber until the transaction was finalized. The expressions on travelers' faces when they recognized me from news reports. Priceless. You're that guy, right? Who? Yes, that's me, your Uber millionaire. It seemed unreal the day the money appeared in my account. My total after taxes and fees was around 28 million. I started by purchasing a simple 3-bedroom home in a gated neighborhood. It wasn't very fancy, but it was in the child's school district and had adequate security. I put 2 million each in trust for Lily and Max's education expenses. Until they become 25, they are unable to touch it. In order to stay occupied and have a reliable source of income, I launched a modest software consulting firm. The transaction wasn't unexpected. Some of my former colleagues who had supported me through everything were employed. Then Amy took the initiative. At my new home, I was served papers. Since we were still legally married when the value of the stock rose, she demanded half of the acquisition funds. Since it goes without saying that a violent abuser shouldn't have millions to spend on children, plus back child support is computed using my new net worth in primary custody. Ironically, I would have been jailed and forced to cash out some shares early if she hadn't set me up. She might have had half of it. However, there is an amusing aspect to charges of documented domestic violence. She arrived on a Sunday morning at my new home. Since the court dates, I hadn't seen her in person. Wearing this modest Target dress and looking quite depressed. Not like the Lululemon she usually wears. Everything. Her eyes were swollen as if she had been sobbing and she hardly wore makeup. "Can we have a conversation?" she queries. As if we were in a Lifetime film. The children are the focus. With her, it's always about the children. It's funny that she was preoccupied with ruining their father's life and neglected them. But I opened the door for her. I had my phone recording in my pocket and security cameras all around the place. Problems with trust number. Only experience. She sobs as she sits in my living room lamenting Mike's manipulation of her. He had apparently persuaded her that I was unfaithful. Forecast. A lot. Said I was going to take the kids and leave her broke. Rich from the man who actually assisted in setting me up for abuse. She cried because he was so domineering. I filed the charges because of him. I felt bewildered and afraid. Yes, Amy, those bruises just materialized out of thin air. Additionally, the witness statements were self-evident. The real kicker comes next. Despite my mistakes, I am still legally your wife. During our marriage, the value of the shares rose. I'm entitled to half for the children. Hell, this lady almost destroyed my job, stole my children, had me arrested, and now wants half of my money. In fact, the audacity is amazing. You are missed by the children. She goes on, seeing my response. We may reunite as a family. Make a new beginning. Yes, as nothing says new beginning like unfounded accusations of domestic abuse. She talked about going to therapy and doubting how she had discovered her flaws, demonstrating that she had prepared the speech. Yes, how the true abuser had been Mike. Ironic. She even mentioned the coffee shop where we had our first date, as if traveling down memory lane would cause me to forget everything. My phone keeps exploding up when she's speaking. It turns out that when the money came in, she informed her lawyer that she was trying to make amends and create a story about us working things out. She begins with the waterworks next, on how difficult it has been to live in a little flat. Karma, who works additional hours at the dentist office, is a bitch. Oh no, the kids' activities are not affordable for actual job. Perhaps stop spending $200 on leggings. She responds, I never wanted any of this. Mike gave me the impression that you were a monster. I know now, though, that he was the true monster. Correct. Because in order to prepare complex abuse claims, Mike had her cheat for months. At work, I got arrested 3 times for stealing my children. 5. Purchase 6 gym equipment items with my child support. Everybody we knew was told lies. The finest part, though, comes after. She takes out her phone and shows me current photos of the children that I hadn't seen before due to access restrictions. Lily at her presentation of dance. Max is playing soccer. Every moment I had missed. She says they need their father. This is something we can resolve. Interpretation. I have no money. You're wealthy. Let's pretend your life wasn't ruined by me. Then she reveals the secret. I spoke with my attorney. I have rights if we are unable to resolve this. The value of the stock rose while we were married. In addition to your past domestic abuse, it's there, the danger that was causing the tears. Amy classic. I gave her time to complete her act. Even provided her with some Kleenex. The rough, inexpensive ones, not the posh, soft sort. I just replied, I'll have my lawyer get in touch with yours and show her around. I contacted my attorney as soon as she departed. Amy had been busy, it turned out. Submitted an application for emergency spousal assistance using the acquisition funds. Attempted to change the custody arrangement by arguing that I was a flight risk due to my newfound money. Even contacted a few of my former colleagues in search of dirt. The true humor. In between gym pictures with her new trainer, she continues to share motivational sayings on Instagram about overcoming negativity and discovering your truth. I suppose Mike was replaced. What transpired in court will be unbelievable to you all. Do you recall the security cameras I mentioned earlier? Yes, they will soon gain prominence. Last month was the scheduled court date. Amy appears to have plundered the Salvation Army. Hair in an untidy bun, a simple outfit, and no makeup. Feelings of a struggling single mother. By the way, despite court orders, she had the children with her. Her lawyer takes the stage first, sitting in the front row like props in her small play. The man is dressed in a suit that most likely cost more than my first vehicle. He begins by portraying Amy as a kind wife who sacrificed her own goals to raise our children and helped her husband in his IT profession. Asserts that since her emotional support was essential to the company's success, she should get half of the acquisition funds. Excellent emotional support indeed. False DV allegations convey more than anything else that I trust in you. Then they bring up the subject of domestic abuse once more. Try spinning it like the erratic tech guy who made a fortune with stocks and may be able to take my millions and leave the country. They even had the audacity to imply that with my limitless wealth I may be dangerous. My lawyer, Greg, absolute legend, appears bored as he sits there taking notes. Amy is always giving me these troubled glances, presumably asking why their narrative isn't making us panic. Then it's our turn. Greg adds, Your Honor, before we start our defense, I'd like to present some new evidence that's recently come to light as he gets to his feet and straightens his tie. Here comes the video from my home's security cameras. You see, Amy's phony reunion act wasn't a one-time visit. She had been attempting to get into my office practically every day. You know who spent half of her time with her Mike? The whole planning process was captured on video. Amy and Mike saw her putting some fictitious proof in my mailbox when they were sitting in his car outside my house, physically practicing her impassioned speech. Before the DV allegations, she had written a letter to herself expressing her fear of me. They also made fun of how simple it would be to steal half of my money. But hold on, there's more. Do you recall the injuries she used to frame me with? It turns out that she and Mike staged those two back when they were still neighbors, as my ringing doorbell captured. In the video, they can be seen snapping pictures rehearsing her terrified white face and applying makeup to simulate injuries. How did the judge look through all of this? Priceless. Mike, who was subpoenaed to attend, appeared to be about to vomit. The bailiff forced him to stay despite his repeated attempts to escape. The nuclear weapon is then dropped by Greg. It turns out that Mike and Amy had been attempting to con other people in a similar way. Two additional men, both accomplished computer workers who were wrongfully accused of abuse, were located in separate locations. In divorce settlements, both were taken to the cleaners. Mike and Amy were experts at it. The true MVP, Jessica, Mike's former spouse. As an attorney, she had spent months constructing a case against them. She brought a ton of evidence, including bank documents, emails, and messages to the court that detailed how they had divided the money from their prior swindle. Amy's lawyer appeared to want to crawl under the table by the time Greg finished. Began to backpedal so quickly that I was afraid he would topple down. My client could have been perplexed by some of the circumstances, Your Honor. The judge was not amenable to it. Declared a recess. Returned an hour later looking quite angry. I ordered Amy to pay my legal expenses throughout her claim for the stock money, and I submitted the entire matter to the DA for possible fraud charges. The greatest thing, though, the change in custody. After watching those films of Amy and Mike conspiring to defraud me, the court ordered an urgent custody review. While Amy is being investigated for fraud and perjury, the children are now with me. Oh, and when the catch is over, Mike tries to flee. immediately ran for the parking lot and was apprehended by Jessica's new boyfriend, a police officer. Let's talk about karma. The last update time. Since the court battle 3 months ago, a lot has transpired. Amy and Mike were arrested first. It turns out that it is federal territory to execute certain fraud schemes beyond state boundaries. For weeks, the FBI has been assembling evidence against them. In addition to me, they discovered 3 additional victims. All of the IT men were falsely accused of DV. Everything was lost. In the rig, everything becomes divorced. Amy and Mike were experts at their swindle. The children now live with me full-time. I won't lie, it's been difficult. 1 father and 2 traumatized children. Being a full-time parent requires a great deal of turmoil. During the first week, I sent Lily to school wearing shoes that didn't match burnt supper 3 times and forgot all about Max's show and tell day. However, we're working things out. I engaged a child psychologist with expertise in instances involving parental alienation. It's fantastic that Dr. Sarah doesn't give the children her complete name. At last, Lily talked about how Amy and Mike helped her to confess that she was afraid of me. I liked money more than they did, Max had been informed. Therefore, I didn't want to see them anymore. Who treats their own children that way? The house thing went more smoothly than anticipated. Relocated us to a modestly ostentatious area with decent schools. Max has a gaming area. Minecraft-obsessed kids let Lily choose her own bedroom decor. Very pink right now. They feel safer thanks to a security system that would make Fort Knox envious. I began doing full-time work from home. The children now come first, even if my consultancy business is going well. Most initiatives are being handled by a strong staff while I concentrate on being a father. It's funny how life goes. My greatest accomplishment to date after years of striving for tech success is getting Max to laugh at my awful dad jokes. Amy faces 15 to 20 years in prison for perjury, fraud, and other offenses. I'm not quite sure I understand. The feds aren't playing along with her lawyer's attempts to reach an agreement. It turns out that coordinated fraud operations that target computer professionals are something they truly dislike. Who could have known? As soon as things became serious, Mike rolled on Amy. The man sobbed while being held by the FBI. She was the mastermind, they said, most likely. Furthermore, he was only a victim of her deceit. Unquestionably, BS. He is still considering a minimum of 10 years. Through all of this, Mike's ex-girlfriend, Jessica, has been unexpectedly amazing. She has been excellent with the kids and is assisting the federal authorities in constructing their case. They recall her from our time as neighbors. She occasionally joins them in baking cookies. Just sincere concern for 2 children who have endured a lot without any drama. The financial issues were resolved on their own. Create a suitable trust for the children. Bought a few uninteresting but reliable investments. A non-profit that supports fathers battling bogus domestic violence accusations was suggested and established by my financial advisor. Already, the organization has assisted 3 fathers in helping their children resume dating. Yes, at this time, the answer is definitely no. Aside from trust difficulties, I won't introduce new people to my children until they're ready. Adult turmoil is enough for them to last a lifetime. However, there was some unanticipated benefit to all of this. Do you recall my previous employer? The one that let me go following the DV charges. Their CEO personally apologized over the phone, offered to hire me as a consultant. I declined and cleared my name in a public letter. It had meaning even if it was no longer needed. Lily's academic performance has improved. According to her instructors, she is smiling and engaging in class once more. Next semester, she will be a part of the scientific club. It turns out that she actually inherited her dad's nerdiness. Max remains Max. His heart was too large for his body and he had boundless vitality. He has made the decision that when he grows up, he wants to produce computer games that assist others. Last week, the neighbor who made that untrue accusation against me stopped by to express regret. Said that Amy had shown her fictitious proof to persuade her that I was dangerous. Even if we won't be friends, it's one fewer person who will think I'm a monster. There are still difficult days. The children occasionally experience nightmares. When I'm gone from view for too long, Lily becomes nervous. At least once a week, Max asks me if I'm certain I want them to live with me. However, we're mending by focusing on each day as it comes. Story 3. My stepmother's falsehoods caused my dad to expel me as a teenager. For my sister, he now wants my house. but they were dumbfounded by what I disclosed. This whole affair began when I was 15 years old, and I am currently a 31-year-old man working as a real estate developer. When I was 4, my real mother passed away from cancer. Dad, who was 42 at the time, married this woman when I was 7 years old. Since that's her genuine name, I'll refer to her as Beth, 35, female. At first glance, she appeared to be pleasant. You know, the whole trying too hard stepmother thing. However, once she gave birth to my half-sister Jenny when I was a child, everything changed. Dad was so hard on me all the time. Really extravagant. Tight. For him, nothing I ever accomplished was sufficient. I can still clearly recall passing this extremely challenging chemistry test with a B+. Rather of expressing joy, he simply gazed at me and said, "Why wasn't this an A on the basketball team? Why don't you start that kind of stuff all the time?" he would ask. But it's a very other scenario with Jenny. They would say, "Oh honey, it's okay, even if she failed an exam. You gave it your all." While I was there, Beth made sure Jenny was treated like a princess, the one that consistently messed up everything. In retrospect, I'm very certain that I had ADHD or a condition that was never identified. For example, I struggled to concentrate in class and couldn't stay still. However, Dad would yell at me rather than attempting to diagnose the issue. "Why can't you just be normal like your sister?" was his favorite thing to say. Beth, meanwhile, stood there nodding as if I were a problem that needed to be solved. Dad wasn't home much since he worked these insane long hours at his construction firm. Beth would truly come into her own at that point. I would have to prepare a sandwich for myself since she would forget to prepare enough food for supper. Or she would intentionally wash my garments incorrectly, causing them to deteriorate or shrink. I couldn't truly prove little things. Do you understand? Dad would just claim I was causing problems again if I attempted to inform him? Because Beth had led him to believe so. The mental tricks she performed were the worst. After rearranging my belongings, she would accuse me of being disorganized or risk breaking anything. And I was constantly at fault somehow. Dad took all of it seriously. For what reason would Beth fabricate that he was totally enamored by her finger? Then came the day that made all the difference. I was taking my customary detour via Wilson Park on my way home from school. I spotted Beth and this man at the old gazebo at that point. I initially assumed it could have been a friend or something, but then I noticed them sharing a kiss. And not simply a kiss, if you get what I mean. I wasn't sure whether I recognized the man to Mark, but I believe Beth spotted me fleeing. His name was I Believe. On occasion, he would attend these charity gatherings at our home. It was said that Beth was jogging. A true buff guy. Always dressed in elegant outfits. He seems to have made the gym his home. I didn't know what to do. Inform Dad. Yes, exactly. As if he would trust me. For years, Beth had made sure my father believed I was merely a troublemaker. In addition, Dad was completely smitten with Jenny, who was 8 years old at the time. He would most likely believe that I was only envious or attempting to make trouble. So I didn't say anything. I made an effort to block out what I had seen, but I soon began to notice things that I couldn't stop. For example, no one else in the family had Jenny's strange reddish-brown hair. Dad was often preoccupied, so he never noticed. I heard Beth talking on the phone one evening when I got up to grab some water. I was going to enter the kitchen, but I halted as soon as I heard her tone. I caught enough of her whispering to make my stomach turn. "Mark, you don't get it. He's becoming aware." At first, I didn't know who she was referring to, but then she did. He believes that she is his, but the reality is known to both of us. It was as though the room's air had been drawn out. I knew who she was referring to. Jenny. Her father wasn't my dad. Mark was. I must have made a sound because Beth fell silent. Then she criticized all of the phony sweetness. "You shouldn't be up this late, honey." Before she could see me, I ran back to my room. I felt I could be ill since my heart was beating so rapidly. Even though I lacked evidence, I was certain that I now understood the truth. And I was certain that Beth would stop at nothing to prevent me from informing my father. But Beth must have realized I knew something. She became quite interested in me, especially when Jenny was present. It was impossible for me to pass Jenny's room without Beth suddenly showing up and asking me what I was doing. She began to inform her father that I was behaving strangely with Jenny. I understand now. Dad was suspicious of me since she was hinting at something. I recall this one instance. Jenny needed help with her multiplication tables, so I was tutoring her. Simple mathematical concepts. I can still hear Beth's voice when she informed Dad that I was getting too near to Jenny after she virtually dragged her away and claimed she would help instead. The thought of that makes me ill. Beth, that's how it was for about 2 weeks, observing everything I did and whispering things to my father when she believed I was not able to hear. At supper, Dad started staring at me strangely. I made every effort to avoid being in the home, but that just made matters worse. Dad was advised by Beth that I was most likely doing drugs or something, and no one even inquired about my well-being. I was so worried out that no one seemed to care that my grades were suffering. My father became very irate with me. I saw Beth at the park with Mark around 2 weeks later. That day, I arrived home from school as usual. When I first came in, something seemed off. Before I even opened the door, I could hear Beth sobbing, and 2 police cars were parked outside our house, like that very phony sobbing that people use to attract attention. When I come in, I see Beth sobbing uncontrollably on the couch while 2 police officers sit across from her father, who is standing in the corner, seems ready to kill someone. Jenny has vanished from view. When I enter, everyone glances at me and stops chatting. A police officer gets up and asks if we may speak. While the other officer remains with Beth and Dad, they lead me to the kitchen. At that point, they inform me that Jenny and Beth informed them that I had been improperly touching Jenny. At first, I was unable to even comprehend what they were saying, as if my brain had simply stopped working. "What?" I asked repeatedly. No, it didn't repeatedly occur, but they persisted in their terrible inquiries. "You touched her where you threatened to remain silent. How many times I was on the verge of vomiting." Beth was still acting like she was sobbing, and I could hear her muttering things like, "I should have known." I noticed the indicators. Dad was clenching his hands and stood there without saying anything. I was asked whether I wanted to provide a statement by the police. I witnessed Beth cheating on her father, so I told them she was lying and attempting to get rid of me. A huge error. They didn't think I was real. When Dad heard me say it, he went utterly crazy. Began yelling that I was envious of Jenny and was attempting to destroy his marriage. Called me all the names you can imagine. Said that I required assistance because I was mentally ill. The police were unable to locate any concrete proof, since nothing ever occurred, of course. Furthermore, I was just 15 at the time, but the harm had already been done. After hurling a trash bag at me, Dad gave me 10 minutes to gather my belongings and go. Said he would murder me himself if I ever got close to Jenny again. He practically grabbed me by my shirt and pushed me toward the stairs as I tried to tell him about Beth and Mark one last time. He was more irate than I had ever seen him. I was the only one who noticed Beth's little grin as she stood there. I packed my school backpack and any clothing I could put in the bag. I tried to fetch my Game Boy, but my dad told me that because he paid for it, everything in the home belonged to him. I could hear Beth downstairs the entire time I was up there, most likely making sure Dad didn't become angry. Jenny was there when I descended again. She seemed perplexed, as if she didn't comprehend what was going on. Beth was shielding her from me with her arms wrapped around her. The thing that kills me the most is that what Jenny's expression was. She was only a child. Beth got rid of me by using her own kid. I was told to relinquish my residence to my father. He said that I was no longer his son. Beth remarked, "Perhaps someday you'll get the help you need," while pulling a false, sorrowful expression. I felt like screaming that she was lying and that she was the one in need of assistance. However, what was the purpose? I knew they wouldn't believe me. They watched me go, presumably to make sure I did. I took one look back. Beth was still acting like she was weeping as Dad held Jenny. Dad assuring Jenny she was safe now was the last thing I heard. That night, with around $40 in my wallet and no idea what to do, I wandered about for hours. Beth had already informed all of my friends' parents that I was a predator, so I was unable to visit any of their homes. She had meticulously planned the entire event. I came to an abandoned structure where a homeless man resided. That first night, they allowed me to crash there. I spent the following few months living there. No longer able to attend school, of course. Since I was just 15, I was unable to obtain a legitimate employment. I did certain things for food that I'm not proud of. The worst thing, Beth made sure her side of the story was heard by everyone in town. It was impossible for me to go anyplace without getting these glances. Lost. Even my once likable teachers stopped talking to me, as did all of my friends. I simply lost my entire existence. I had to leave town for that reason. In the end, I stayed in the aforementioned abandoned building for almost 6 months. This ancient storehouse was close to the railroad tracks. About 5 or 6 other males also lived there. You know, the most of them were good individuals who simply had horrible luck. Tom, an older man, took me under his wing. After his wife passed away and he lost his job, He had been homeless for years. He showed me where to acquire food, for example, how to remain warm in the cold, and which locations would allow you to use their restrooms. I never imagined that I would need to grasp basic survival skills. I kept hoping that my father would change his mind, see the reality, and come retrieve me. However, he never did. He was simply unconcerned. I applied for employment, but no one seemed interested in hiring me. Beth had ensured that everyone in our tiny community was aware of her version of events. I was rejected by McDonald's as well. At the grocery store, I was the person who everyone spoke about in whispers. If parents saw me approaching, they would practically drag their children away. Began engaging in some dubious activities to make ends meet. Not violent, but yes. I don't feel proud of that period of my life. Tom said that I should move out of town and start again somewhere else. But you know, I was afraid. I was only a child. Really. What was I meant to do? Then these police officers arrived at the warehouse one evening. We had been reported for trespassing by someone. We were given 10 minutes to go. That night, I lost the majority of my belongings. Anyhow, what little I had left, I walked to the next town over with Tom. Lasted the entire night. We arrived at this eatery at a truck stop. I was keeping track of my finances. I had around $27 left. Tom informs me that he may have a relative in the city who may help. Said that his relative owes him a favor and runs a few eateries. The distance to the city was about 200 miles. What else could I do, though? Tom encouraged me to get away while I could, and he handed me the final $40 and his cousin's address. Said I still had a shot, but he was too old to start afresh. After that, I never saw Tom again. I wonder what happened to him sometimes. I slept in the bus terminal for the first week after taking a Greyhound to the city. I finally located Dave, Tom's cousin. He wasn't at all what I had anticipated. Very well-groomed man, run like 3 distinct eateries. He hired me to do the dishwashing at this upscale Italian establishment. The initial months were difficult, was dozing in the storage area of the restaurant. After hours, Dave allowed me to crash there. I saved as much money as I could. I finally saved up enough money to rent this small room in a really undesirable area of town. Hey, though it was mine. I began studying as much as I could about the restaurant industry, went from dishwashing to prep cooking and finally to line cooking. The head chef began teaching me about food costs, inventories, and other related topics after noticing that I was strong with numbers. Amy was a frequent patron of the eatery. About twice a week, she would visit with her mother. After I started working as a waiter, I always sat in my area. She was a business student at college or something. When it wasn't too hectic, we would converse. For the first time in many years, she didn't treat me like trash. I can still clearly recall her words. The initial evening. "What's good here?" "Hey." She looked at me rather than the menu when she inquired. "The carbonara is really delicious. The sauce is homemade by Marco." I probably sounded foolish when I stated that. "Do you really know who prepares the meals?" She grinned. "Most of the sites I visit. After rating the specialties, the servers simply vanish." We ended up discussing food for approximately 5 minutes. Her mother simply sat there grinning. "Amy, please quit pestering the poor waiter," her mother told me later. "He has additional tables." Amy chuckled as she surveyed the deserted eatery. "Yes, mother. He's obviously overloaded." They began to visit more frequently and consistently asked for my part. Amy occasionally brought her homework from her studies in business at the nearby college. She was having trouble with some accounting-related tasks one evening. She looked over her textbook and moaned, "This is absurd. How can a business turn a profit even when it has lost money?" I refilled her drink and remarked, "Creative accounting. To make it appear favorable to investors, they are most likely manipulating the figures." She gave me the impression that I had changed my mind. "What knowledge do you possess regarding corporate accounting?" Actually, I had been in the library reading business literature, wished to learn about the operations of eateries. One day, I could open my own. She became really delighted when I told her this. "That's incredible. The majority of individuals our age don't give a damn about this. Would you want to examine this issue with me?" The next thing I know, I'm assisting her with her schoolwork while taking a break at her table. Her mother would only observe us while grinning knowingly. This continued for months. I would try not to fall in love with Amy when she came in and we would discuss business. By the way, I utterly failed at that portion. Despite her intelligence, she never made me feel foolish. Similar to this one instance, she said, "I don't understand why you're working here. You're obviously skilled at these business-related stuff. College is out of reach for some people, I muttered in embarrassment. College is not necessary for success, she remarked. My dad, who now runs 3 businesses, never went. Experience, he believes, is more important than degrees. I still remember the talk. I began to consider my options outside of working in restaurants. On my days off, I studied at the library until I earned my GED. Amy assisted me with the mathematical portions. For about 5 years, she never inquired about my background, and I never told her that I was afraid she would quit talking to me if she found out. Get up, work, research, go to sleep, do it again. Didn't go on a date, failed to form a friendship, really just concerned in getting by and trying to improve. I kept thinking about Jenny the entire time, praying that Beth wasn't causing her any problems. Unfortunately, Amy showed up one evening looking quite excited. You know what, Dad is trying to find someone to assist him in overseeing his new real estate development project. Entry-level job with plenty of opportunity for advancement. You ought to submit an application. Amy? I froze. I never even completed my high school education. You did, however, receive your GED. That's the only important thing. Try it, please. What could possibly go wrong? The worst possible outcome. She might learn about anything, even Beth's falsehoods and my background. Amy persisted, though. Please. For me, Father, have faith in my judgment, and I have no doubt that you would excel at this. I thus submitted an application. Dave had to lend me a suit, still in good shape. It was a scary interview. Before saying anything, Amy's father just looked at me for a minute or so. You understand business, Amy says. Show it. Oh, he said. I was able to effectively discuss real estate development trends that I had read about and even offered some suggestions for his next project. He just nodded and stated, "You start Monday, at the end." Amy gave me a hug when I told her I had been hired. It was the first embrace I had received in years. I nearly burst into tears at the restaurant. "See," she said, "you can do what I told you." Everything changed because of the job. Her father started to resemble the parent I wish I had. When I had suggestions, he genuinely paid attention. Taught me all there is to know about developing real estate. I was overseeing my own projects within a year. Amy and I grew closer during. I never asked her out, even though we would converse for hours over coffee after work. I couldn't stop thinking about my background and Beth's falsehoods. Amy was worthy of better than any homeless man. The night that altered everything then arrived. We were working on a project proposal late at night. It's just the 2 of us in the workplace. Amy added abruptly, "You know you're really dumb about some things for someone who knows so much about business. What are you saying?" She gave me a direct glance. "I've been waiting for you to ask me out for the past 2 years." I sat there looking foolish. "I'm not good enough for you," I finally said. "There are things about me that you are unaware of, Amy. Give me a try." "So," she said. All I told her about Beth was that, about being homeless, about the falsehoods. Waited for her to display fear or contempt. Rather, she broke down in tears. Then she became enraged. Not at me, at my dad and Beth. "Those awful people," she remarked. "How could they harm their own son in that way?" Then she just stretched across the desk and planted a kiss on my lips. Yes, that's how Amy and I ended up meeting. But when you least expect it, life has a way of bringing back the past. After we began dating, Amy and I were married really quickly. Her family was fantastic. In fact, they were like sons to me. We purchased this lovely 5-bedroom home in a desirable area and had our first child, a boy. Everything in life was ideal. Then around 3 months ago, I came upon this friend request while perusing Facebook at work. My dad appears much older in my profile photo than I recall. Like a fool, I simply sat there looking at my phone. As soon as Amy arrived home, she realized something was off. In our kitchen, I was sitting there looking at nothing. "Sweetheart, what's the matter?" As she placed our kid to sleep, she inquired. I said, "Dad found me on Facebook. He added me as a friend." She took a seat next to me. "How will you respond? I have no idea. I have yet to open his mail. Would you like me to read it first?" I gave my phone to her. She read the note aloud as soon as she opened it. "I realize it's been a while, son. As I become older, I've been reflecting a lot on the past. I can't go a day without thinking of you, Beth. I also wish to put things right. Jenny's big brother is missed. Dad, please give us an opportunity to explain love." I chuckled, but not in a joyful way. Jenny is missing me. I doubt that she even remembers me. When it all happened, she was 8 years old. Amy gave me a hand squeeze. I did, but you don't have to answer. I wanted to know why, but maybe I'm a fool. Now, 16 years later. I replied to the mail after accepting the invitation. Why now? He responded quickly. I am now 58. Experienced a few health scares. Made me understand that life is too short to harbor resentment. It would mean a lot to have you at Jenny's upcoming wedding. For a few weeks, we exchanged messages. I learned that Jenny is 24 years old, employed in marketing, and engaged to a lawyer. Dad says it's still best the same. She probably is. Amy constantly warning me to exercise caution. She said that people don't really change all that much. However, I wanted to think that Dad had changed. Isn't that stupid? They requested to come. Amy stated that although it was up to me, she would back my decision. I said yes. A huge error. On a Saturday morning, they arrived. Dad seemed elderly, as in very ancient, gray hair, has a minor limp when walking. In fact, Beth looked precisely the same. That phony grin was still there. Jenny was now an adult. I was the only one who appeared to realize that I looked even more like Mark. The first few minutes were uncomfortable. No one was sure what to say. Jenny then saw pictures of our family. Is this your son? As she looked over our 3-year-old's photos, she inquired. Yes, I said, that's Jake. I'm an aunt, she said in a whisper, then began to weep. Beth rushed to console her right away. The same Beth. Dad entered my home as if he were a native. With that scarcely concealed approbation that he never used to offer me, I swept over everything. For yourself, you've done well. He nodded as he spoke. Development of real estate. I never would have imagined. I crossed my arms, already preparing for whatever the true purpose of this visit was. I was given a chance by Amy's father. Letting the words hang, I said. Beth, who was always the spin doctor, spoke up before the stillness became too oppressive, unlike some others. Back then, we all made mistakes, she replied in a kind voice. Our goal is to put things right. Amy took the exit right away after standing close to the door, as if she was looking for an excuse to depart. Before she could say something she would later regret, she added, I'll check on Jake. Astute, but Jenny didn't have that filter. As if to claim it, she strolled around the living room, running her fingers over the walls and furnishings. She looked down the corridor and remarked, This house is amazing. There are 5 bedrooms. You only have 1 child, though. I feigned a courteous grin. I stated I was planning for more. We also utilize one as an office. It's none of your business, really. With the customary let's talk man-to-man gesture, Dad put a hand on my shoulder and led me to my office. My first caution should have been that. Like he owned my chair, he sunk into it. Son, he began, I have a serious question for you. I remained upright. What? It's your sister's wedding. Establishing a family. He took a moment to consider that, as if it were meant to have some significance for me. They are trying to find a home, but the cost of everything is prohibitive. Nowadays, I felt sick to my stomach. No, already I could see the direction this was taking. He went on pointing about as if he were trying to sell me my own damn house. You've got all this space? 3 individuals can sleep in 5 bedrooms. This is exactly the kind of environment that Jenny and Steve need. You're doing well. May easily purchase a second home. I waited for the joke while I looked at him. Do you really want me to give Jenny my house? Well, he answered, not exactly. As if that improved things in any way. Sell it to them at a discount, maybe. You now earn a nice living. I really went crazy. Get out, I replied. He let out a frustrated sigh as if I were the one being challenging. Son, be sensible. It's your sister. You choose the sister instead of me. I didn't care if my voice sounded harsher than I had intended. The sister for whom you expelled me. There was a miscommunication. I let out a loud chuckle. A miscommunication. At 15, you kicked me out. I was homeless. He dared to appear irritated as if I were bringing up some awkward subject. That was a long time ago. Jenny must. Jenny must. With my hands balled into fists by my sides, I raised my voice. What about my necessities? A parent who trusted me. Perhaps before he thought of another one. Beth hurried inside with that phony, worried look on her face. Is everything in here all right? I laughed sharply and without humor. Yes, indeed. Beth, Everything is wonderful. I turned to face her and gave her a savage smile. Dad is only requesting that I give your daughter my house. The one that isn't even his, you know. Beth's face was devoid of color and the room fell quiet. Dad stopped. Jenny entered looking perplexed, most likely attempting to determine whether she had heard me correctly. The entire game shifted in an instant. I left before witnessing the repercussions. I just left my office and went in search of Amy. In the backyard, Jake discovered them while Amy watched him play with his trucks. She realized something had happened with just one glance at my face. While everyone else was still digesting what I had said, she led Jake inside. Beth attempted damage management by accusing Dad of lying and claiming that I was only attempting to harm them like I usually did. The quintessential Beth move. This time, though, Dad wasn't buying it. Perhaps it was because Jenny was standing there precisely like Mark. Or perhaps he had been skeptical all along. Right then, he wanted a DNA test. Jenny broke down in tears. Real tears of confusion, not the phony ones like her mother's. She continued asking why everyone was shouting and what was going on. I was simply making trouble again, trying to destroy their lives because I was envious, Beth said, as she grabbed her and roughly pulled her out of her house. Dad remained. He sat in our living room looking at nothing for a long time without saying anything. He then inquired as to how I knew. I told him all about how when I was 15 I saw Beth with Mark in the park and how Jenny resembled him. About Beth's framing of me. Beth would never do that, but I could see the uncertainty eating at him when she thought I may tell someone. He didn't believe me at first and continued claiming I was incorrect. Suddenly, everything that had never made sense was coming together. Jenny's face characteristics didn't fit any member of the family, and she had reddish-brown hair that neither of them possessed. Beth. I have to avoid Jenny at all costs. The following week was hectic. That DNA test was really completed by Dad. When he received the results, he came to my office. Did not even hold off on going home. Just took a seat and started crying. Tests revealed no chance. He was the father of Jenny. For the last 24 years, everything he believed to be true about his life was false. I ought to have been content, perhaps even joyful. This demonstrated that I had always been telling the truth. However, it left me feeling hollow to see my dad cry in my workplace. I was scared of this man as a child because he always appeared so powerful, but now he seemed totally shattered. He inquired about Mark. Did I know what he did and where he was? I shared what little I knew with him. There were instances when Mark would visit the homeless areas. Usually they made a mistake, but it's been years since I've seen him. I don't know if he's still alive. Dad left my office with the appearance of someone who had aged 20 years in 10 minutes, but he was not beaten. He was enraged. I assumed that would be the last of it. Let them handle the situation on their own. No longer my concern. The next day, Amy phoned me at work. Dad had gone home and misplaced it, it turned out. Beth attempted to twirl it, as usual. The lab must have made a mistake, so the test must have been incorrect. Dad, though, wasn't buying it for the first time. He lost his temper as decades of deceit and manipulation suddenly came tumbling down. He did more than rant. He seriously injured her. She is currently in the hospital. 3 vertebral fractures. According to doctors, she will most likely require pain medication for the remainder of her life. It was Jenny who phoned the police. Right there in their living room, Dad was arrested. Since he has a spotless record, they are discussing 3 to 5 years. Additionally, he may benefit from his advanced age. However, the Best family is advocating for the longest possible punishment. Jenny, too. Overnight, her entire world fell apart. The wedding has begun. It turns out that her affluent lawyer fiancé had no desire to take on this much baggage. She has been bombarding my phone lately, pleading with me to assist her in locating her biological father. Amy constantly begging me to just walk away and stop bothering them. She's most likely correct. However, a part of me cannot. It's for Jenny, not for Dad or Beth. None of this was requested by her. Everything in her life that she believed to be true suddenly became false. I then learned today that Beth is already addicted to the painkillers. She was checked into treatment by her relatives. Jenny, who is residing with her aunt, won't even talk to Beth. Dad is facing actual jail time. They make the ideal little family. Lost. As simple as that. And the most peculiar aspect. None of it feels pleasant to me. I believed that demonstrating I was speaking the truth would make me feel good, and that I would at last feel like I was getting justice. It simply feels empty, though. Similar to witnessing a home burn down long after everything has been saved. However, I was just thinking about my family at the time. Amy was finally making use of those additional bedrooms when she became pregnant again, this time with a daughter. Not in the manner that Beth and Dad had anticipated. Sometimes it's funny how life turns out. But 2 months later, everything fell apart. The situation has become much more complex. Last month was Dad's trial. I didn't go. My attorney suggested against it. I really didn't want to watch any of them to boot. Jenny informed me that he received 3 years. Although it could have been harsher, the court considered his age and spotless record. 3 years is still a long time at 58. Is Beth still in treatment? It turns out that long before her father sent her to the hospital, she had been using painkillers. Jenny was informed by her sister that Beth had been abusing them for years. Just did a great job hiding it. Now it makes sense. Why? She was always making up stories and becoming quite paranoid. She is expected to have therapy for at least 6 months longer. Jenny has been. She's not doing very well, though. She set out on her own to find Mark, making inquiries in homeless shelters and other locations. Met someone who knew him at last. It turns out that he overdosed and died behind a convenience shop 2 years ago. When Jenny learned the truth, she lost it. At around 3 in the morning, she begins sending me lengthy texts in which she describes how her entire existence feels like a lie. Claims that all she can see in the mirror is Mark's face and that she is no longer able to look at it. Although I feel sorry for her, Amy advises me to avoid her. She is correct. Jenny becomes increasingly connected and begins to inquire more about the past each time I reply to her. The most peculiar aspect, Jenny's former fiancé made an attempt to contact me. He is concerned about having children with her, so he wanted to know whether the craziness ran in the family. He was told to get lost. Jenny does not deserve that type of criticism, even when she is going through difficult times. Ben was the first to inform folks that I had made up the whole Mark story in order to get revenge. Notwithstanding the DNA test demonstrating that Jenny is not her father's child. She is still attempting to paint me in a negative light. In fact, some of her former neighbors think she's real. People in small towns are drawn to drama. Amy's pregnancy must be progressing nicely. Our child will be a girl. I sometimes think of Jenny when he was that age as I see my kid play. It makes me question whether things might have turned out differently if Dad had recognized the warning signs sooner. Or suppose I had mentioned seeing Beth with Mark to someone else. However, you can't alter the past, can you? Now the house feels different, as if the bad vibes from their stay had finally subsided. Jenny's future room is returned. The father requested that we place her in a nursery for the infant. Amy has everything planned out. Gray and pink color scheme. The ceiling is covered in tiny stars. I still occasionally think about Tom. That homeless man who came to my aid after I was expelled. I wish I could share the outcome with him. Prove to him that I accomplished something. I could, he said. Wherever he is, I hope he's doing well. I've been receiving communications from my father's family. Some people are angry with him for what he did to Beth while others are supporting him. They never gave a damn about my whereabouts. I was homeless for all those years. Family may be funny at times. That's essentially the current situation. I'm not sure how much more can be revealed. You know, life goes on. However, thanks to everyone who has been following the story and offering encouragement. Regards. Writing it down was more beneficial than I had anticipated. A special thank you to whoever recommended treatment. Jenny sent me a last note yesterday and you were right. Stated that she is relocating out of state. Beginning again elsewhere. Asked if we could continue communicating. Maybe eventually, but not right now, I told her. I need to spend some time with my own family. I suppose that's it.